Hello and welcome back to the Finding Hope with OMS webinar series, Mental Health and Wellbeing, as part of our focus on mental health at OMS this month. My name's Sian Southwood and I'm the Head of Programmes joining you from London in the UK. In a moment, I shall be handing you over to Michelle Overton from Mental Wellbeing Service UK, our guest presenter for tonight. But before I do that, I want to run through a bit of housekeeping. Just to note that the session is being recorded and you will receive a link to access that recording after the webinar. It should come out via an email from Zoom about 5 days following tonight. You will also be able to access the PowerPoint that Michelle's going to take us through later. You'll notice that because it is a Zoom webinar, there's no audio or video component for our participants, but you will be able to, of course, ask your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom. If you are experiencing technical glitches, we recommend just logging back out and back in again or using a Chrome browser. We've tried to make the webinar as accessible as possible, so there are what looks like subtitles at the bottom of your screen, and you can also disable those by clicking on the 3 buttons and pausing those. As you exit the webinar, there will be a simple pop-up survey just to understand how you felt about the webinar, if there's any things that we can improve or any suggestions, of course, for subjects going forward. The webinar will run for approximately an hour. We'll have the presentation from Michelle and then an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Michelle to the virtual stage. Hi, Michelle. How are you this evening?
Oh, hello, Sian. Thank you. I'm very well.
Yeah, all set and ready to go?
Yes.
Lovely. So I'm here to help you as much as I can. And if you'd just like to start by introducing yourself, and I'll hand the floor over to you. Thanks, Michelle.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Oh, so first of all, I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. So I'm the Director of Mental Wellbeing Services UK, and my career journey in mental health began about 2 decades ago, and I worked for an organisation called Women's Aid. So I was supporting women who had experienced sexual and domestic violence. From then, I went on to become a Children and Families Programme Manager, and I was supporting young people who had been born with HIV, so from parent to child transmission. And it was from then that I decided to retrain. So I retrained to become a clinical supervisor and a counsellor. So for about the last 10 years, I've been working in universities. I have had my own journey with mental ill health. So I have 2 sons, and when my youngest son was 9 years old, he was diagnosed with liver disease. So actually both of my sons have developed an autoimmune problem. So for my youngest son, his autoimmune problem was with his liver. And so it was a really stressful time to see how his health would go. And by the time he was 16, he did have cirrhosis of his liver. And we were looking at having a liver transplant. I can tell you he's really tall, he's doing really well now, and he has had a liver transplant. But I think what happened for me was the adrenaline got me through. And I couldn't understand that when he was doing well after the transplant, I felt like I'd been hit by a train. And I was a senior counsellor at this point. I was working at the University of Leicester. And so I was meant to be supporting staff and students. I thought one day, I'm going to call my boss and I'm going to tell him that I've eaten something funny and that I've got a stomach bug. And I thought, goodness. I'm a mental health professional. This is only 5 years ago, but I'm a mental health professional, and yet I don't feel able to talk about my mental ill health. And that really fueled my passion to become a mental health instructor trainer. So I now go into organisations to support staff health and wellbeing. So that's a little bit of background about myself. And I want to say thank you for inviting me actually to come and talk about mental health and wellbeing with you this evening. I'm very passionate about it. I'm going to show you my presentation, so do forgive me if I pull funny faces whilst I'm sharing my screen with you. Okay, I think it's really important that when we're talking about mental health and well-being, we could be talking about things that might be activating for you. So it's about keeping yourself safe. And I want you to think about who would be a safe person perhaps for you to be able to talk to, if you have somebody, or who could you access, if things do come up. So we know that it might bring up difficult feelings or things that you need to manage. And thinking about where that support is. So I know you can't use the chat box, but you've got a Q&A box here. So I'm going to ask the questions. So I'm hoping some of you will come back with the answers. So when I say mental health, what words or feelings come to your mind? I say mental health. And if you want to put it in the Q&A, what words, what feelings come to your mind?
Can you see that, Michelle?
I can actually. Let me have a look. Oh, that's brilliant. So I've got some answers here. Thank you very much. So I've got brain health, I've got stress, I've got depression, stress, anxious, anxiety. I've got stress and family, some more stress and depression, and anxiety with my medical condition and depression. So thank you very much for those answers there. Okay, so I asked you what you thought, mental health, what you thought about it. And let's have a look at a definition from the World Health Organization. So they talk about that mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So if we think about the answers that you put in there, when I said mental health, we had quite a lot of stress, anxiety, depression. And I think what happens is the word mental health gets hijacked by mental ill health. Because if I'd said physical health to you, then I wonder whether everybody would have necessarily thought about all of the physical ill health diagnoses. I did try it with a friend actually about 3 months ago, and I said to her physical health, and she said the gym. So with mental health, what happens is the word gets hijacked by mental ill health. So let's have a little bit more of a look at actually what our mental health governs for us. So we've got this definition from the World Health Organization, which is overall, this is how they've defined what mental health is. It's quite positive statements, isn't it? Now, I'm yet to see a list of what the normal stresses of life would look like. I'm not too sure what it would look like. Also talks about working productively and fruitfully. I did wonder if that was in an orchard, but on the whole, it is positive definition. I think the World Health Organization is very much around working. And actually, that's not the reality for everybody. There could be reasons as to why we're not able to work. And also people are retiring. And there's other ways that our life can be purposeful and meaningful. I have another definition here. And this is from the Health Education Authority. Now, it's quite an old one. It's in 1997, but they define mental health as being the emotional and spiritual resilience, which allows us to enjoy life and survive pain, disappointment, and sadness. It is a positive sense of well-being and an underlying belief in our own and others' dignity and worth. And that statement really resonated for me. So I hope you like that one too. So let's have a look at what our mental health governs for us. I'd like to ask us all here as well. I know we can't all put it in the Q&A, but, actually we all have mental health. Just as we have physical health, we do all have mental health. And it's not necessarily that it's, always mental ill health. And I think the pandemic acted as a real catalyst for us all, to see, of course, we have got mental health. So let's have a look at what it governs. So this is how important it is. This is what our mind, our mental health governs. It's how we feel about ourselves, also our self-esteem and our confidence. And forgive me if I'm telling you things that you already know, but confidence and self-esteem are two very different things. You know, they can impact on each other. But I can remember being about 17 years old and somebody saying to me, you need to be more confident. And I thought, no, I don't feel that really fits, because I feel I am confident. So self-esteem is how you value yourself on the inside. It's your worthwhileness. And confidence can be more gauged where it's perhaps been in new situations, learning new skills. You know, it could be in a workplace. That's how we can look at confidence. But self-esteem is how you value yourself on the inside. So our mental health will also govern how we feel, how we think, how we behave, how we manage change. And it would be safe to say that we've had lots of change over these last nearly 3 years too. Also, our mental health will govern how we make, how we sustain, and how we end relationships. Also, how we see ourselves in the future, our hopes for the future, how we interpret events that happen. Also, how stress impacts on us and how we cope with the ups and downs of everyday life. You know, we mentioned that word resilience in the last slide. And if we think about how we cope with the ups and downs of everyday life, because sadly, we will all face adversity. And the word resilience, I think it got quite overused some years ago, but it comes from a Latin word, which is resilio, and it means how we bounce back. So that's how we can cope with the ups and downs of everyday life, how we bounce back, and also how we deal with the negative things that happen in our life. So that's how important it is, and that's what it's governing for us. So let's have a look at what can impact on our mental health. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means. It could be that, you know, we face isolation, or we have done at times. We're feeling isolated. I know lots of people felt like that throughout the pandemic as well. And we've also got the aftermath of the pandemic now too, haven't we? It could be a diagnosis of a chronic health condition, you know, that we have got to learn how to manage and to come to terms with as well. You know, we might be grieving the loss of our health. Money, you know, the cost of living at the moment, it's frightening for people, isn't it? You know, some people don't want to turn the heating on. I don't think there's any hot water bottles or blankets left anywhere. And also how the world feels. You know, it feels quite a scary place to be, doesn't it? You know, with war and with climate change and with the things that are happening. Relationships, you know, have we got relationships? Are they healthy ones? And also, sometimes the good things, you know, having a baby or getting married, you know, they can be exciting and they're good things that are happening, but they can also really impact on our mental health too. Could be expectations. You know, for lots of us, we can feel we've got to a certain time in our life and we feel that we should have achieved certain things or have certain things. Sometimes life is just not like that. Or it could be that we experience abuse or neglect, and also stress. And we're going to have a little bit more of a look at how stress can impact on our mental health now. So we're going to look at a poll. So I'll pass you over to Sean. I think you're going to look at the poll for us. So the question is, in times of stress, how easy is it for you to manage the symptoms of your MS? So all have a go if you can. In times of stress, how easy is it for you to manage the symptoms of your MS? I'm not sure if it's working actually. It says on my screen, host and panelists cannot vote.
Yeah, it is working, Michelle.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're about 70% of the way there.
Thank you. I do lots of this as well.
We like a thumbs up. Okay, we're just about there. Okay, you should be able to see those results, Michelle.
Oh, lovely. So can everybody see them?
They should be able to, yes.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, then. So what we have here, we've got 10% said I manage really well. We've got 46% have said I cope. And we've got 42% of you have said you find it really hard. And 2%, I don't have the knowledge or tools to manage it. Yeah, thank you everyone for taking part in that. So let's have a little bit more of a look at how we can manage stress. Okay, some of you might have seen this before. It's called a stress container, and it's actually evidence-based. It's a cognitive behavioural therapy tool. So first of all, what I want to talk about is the difference between pressure and stress. Okay, so how I liken it is I feel that we all need to have a little bit of pressure. You know, pressure can be good for us. Definitely helps me to get up out of bed in the morning. It will help me to look left and right in the road to stay alive. And I definitely need a deadline, else I'll waffle away for ages. So some pressure can be good for us. However, too much pressure, you know, that can start to lead into stress, can't it? And what we know is that stress is bad for us. So even after you've been experiencing stress for more than 2 weeks, and I had to do a secret smile when I first learned about this. I thought, goodness, I've been stressed for a lot longer than 2 weeks in my life. But your body will start to kick out hormones. And my medical terminology is not so good, but hopefully you've all seen your double helixes for your DNA. And at the bottom of it, it's like you've got the bottom of your shoelace strings that keeps it together at the bottom. But when the hormones are being kicked out from the stress, what happens is the shoelace strings get corroded and it comes undone. And this is when we start to get rogue DNAs going around. And that's why it's been linked to being carcinogenic. So actually stress is bad for us, you know, and I think at points definitely in my life, it can be that I've been running around and studying and working and, you know, trying to cope with all of these things that are going on within family too. And, you know, there's a lot of stress going on. So actually learning how to cope with it is a really good thing, because we can't put a lid on the container, can we? So let's have a look at this container. So you might know that person in a stressful situation that they go like this and they're sorting everything out and it feels like stress is their paradise. And yet you can have somebody else with, you know, perhaps a similar amount of stress and it will impact on them in a very different way. So there's a reason for that. So the size of your container will depend on 3 things. That's your personality, it's your life experiences, and also on genes. Genes can impact it as well. So if we think about some stresses that we could have going in at the moment, so, you know, if we think about, could be our health, could be our mental health actually as well, things that are happening within family, could be finances, work. So we've got all of these different stresses that are going in. Now we can't put a lid on it because life is happening, but what we can do is put some taps on the side of our container to try and relieve some of that pressure and that stress. So we'll have a little bit more of a look into it. So as I'm talking, I want you to have a reflect on what your own stress signature is, because you will all have your own stress signature. And knowledge is power, because if you're not aware of what it is, then you're not able to do anything about it. So mine, when I start to get really stressed, I notice that I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'll be laying there thinking, I really need to be productive today. And I'm still there at 5 a.m. With the most random thoughts that I could possibly even have thought up of. I've never got my sleeve caught so much on the door. You know, I just couldn't even do it if I tried when I'm stressed, and about ripped my shoulder off. And also I noticed that I might become a bit more irritable, and I feel that there's some emotional snapping going on there. So I want you to have a think about, if you've got a pen and paper, that'd be really good, or just make a mental note. What do you notice? What are the signs for you when you start to become stressed? Like I said, that knowledge is power. When we're aware of it, we can do something about it. Now, when we get stressed, lots of people can go to some unhealthy ways of coping. So, we might think that it's going to help, but actually what it does is it blocks the tap up. It can add more pressure and stress in. So it could be that some people will go to smoking. They could be using substances. So that could be alcohol, it could be drugs, and it can be prescription drugs as well. I've heard of people where they've got quite addicted to codeine. Somebody was saying to me, look, I don't want to have a headache, so now I take it even before. It could also be that we're controlling what we eat. We're not eating enough, or perhaps we're overeating to try and fill up pain. Could be that we're over-exercising. If you see somebody that's training and perhaps they've got an injury, so their legs strapped up and they're still exercising, then actually that's really not good for them. It's self-harming. Could be taking risks with their health, or even criticising yourself. You might be withdrawing from everybody. Some people can also have gambling problems. Could be working too much. So I know definitely for me, I can definitely go into workaholic mode. Actually, that's not really sustainable for anybody. Or it might be that we're turning that stress outwards and we're becoming angry with other people because that stress container is just too full. So these are some of the unhealthy ways of coping. Let's have a look at what are some more healthier ways of coping with that stress. Now, I have to make a mental note to put some of these in. I can quite easily go to the other unhealthier ways of coping. So talking, I feel that is one of the best things for me, being able to talk to somebody. I mean, I'm a therapist, so I would promote actually therapy as well, but having somebody to talk to, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I've been made aware as well that you have an opportunity to join a peer support group with our circles. And I think it's actually when you're with other people and hearing other people's stories, it can help you to feel that you're not alone as well. Could be nourishing ourselves with healthy food. And again, when we're feeling really tired, it can become more difficult to think about eating in a healthy way, but it is part of, a cycle of looking after ourselves. Do you feel able to say no? That can be really important, having boundaries and being able to take a rest and have a break. Hobbies are another really good way of dealing with stress. And I can remember working with somebody and he'd been painting these little models. And he said, yeah, but I've just wasted an hour and a half painting a model. And actually, we underestimate the power of creativity and hobbies on healing our minds. And that's never a waste of time, because our physical health and our mental health is so important.
Michelle, sorry, it's
Sean. Oh, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but somebody's asked if you could go over what the size of somebody's container is determined by. So those three things.
Yes, no problem. So it will be on your personality, on your life experiences, and also on your genes. So all three of those things will impact on whether the size of your container is going to be larger or whether it's going to be smaller. So I'll give you an example as well. What I found for me was, because of the life experiences that I'd had, I found that my container seemed to become quite large, that I felt I could deal with quite a lot of things. But it's just being aware, I think, of your own stress signature, and perhaps even externalizing it, writing it down for yourself to see what you've got going into that. I hope that's helpful, and we'll have some questions at the end as well about it too. So thinking of some healthy ways of coping, now it could be alternative therapies as well. Massage, we look at the evidence for massage as well, where it's releasing all of the knots and how that is really good for us. I'm quite a yoga pusher. I had a friend who was a clinical psychologist, and when my son was waiting for his liver transplant, she kept trying to encourage me to go to a yoga class. And I was really pleased I didn't snare, actually, because at the time I thought, goodness, I'm addicted to Netflix and just about making it into work, really. I thought, I don't think that will help. But I found a really good class. I tried a yin yoga class. Some of you might have tried yin yoga here, but it's actually all floor-based with cushions. So it doesn't matter about your level of ability with it. And I sat there for 3 minutes. You hold a position, just one position for 3 minutes, and all on the floor. And I thought to myself, oh, my back's really hurting, my neck. And I thought, I can't sit here for 40 minutes. And by the end of the session, I had no aches or pains whatsoever. So if you get an opportunity to try yin yoga, I would. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. The last one that I have on here is being in nature. And also that the evidence shows us that the ions in the ground will balance our energy. So if you're feeling out of sorts, having a walk with your bare feet on natural ground or grass can really help to rebalance your energy. But again, we have to try to put these things into practice and into place. And let's have a little bit more of a look at more self-care. So I watched a beautiful little video on Instagram, and it was about a little girl, and she was in the bath. So you could only see from her shoulders up, and she was laying there, and she'd got a nice little flannel across her eyes. And her mum had come into the bathroom. She said, oh, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm self-caring. I thought, oh, imagine, that we're teaching children from that young to take care of themselves. And I know a bath can be a lovely way of doing that and very healing, but we're talking about putting enduring self-care practices into place, because self-care can really preserve our health, and that is the importance of it. And I know, again, you have access to an Overcoming MS program where it will support you to look at diet and looking at a plant-based diet, perhaps with fish. Also, the power of meditation. I don't know if some of you are like me. I can find it very difficult to meditate. Sometimes I need to use a guided meditation or an app. And there's lots of apps out there, or on YouTube, things that you can find for free. Might be taking medication where appropriate as well, and exercise at whatever level we're able to do that at. And lastly on here, we've got vitamin D. Now, the amount of students that I saw in the university that would have low levels of vitamin D, and actually having a high influx of that from the doctor, so having a test, and you could see that their mood would really improve. We also know for our minds, omega-3 is really good. So I think it would be helpful to be able to tap into that Overcoming MS program to look at enduring self-care practices. And some of you might have heard of the 5 ways to well-being. So you'll hear a lot about mental health and about well-being. And actually, we all have mental health, and how we look after our mental health is how we look after our well-being. So this is an evidence-based model from the New Economics Foundation. And they studied to say that if we practice these 5 ways to well-being, it will be good for our mental health. And the 5 ways were around connecting. So talking and listening and being there, feeling connected with others. Being active. Says do what you can, enjoy what you do, and move your mood. And, for some people, they're out there doing marathons. Some people are doing the couch to 5K, or for others, it's choosing to, do whatever level of exercise that you can for you, that suits you. Taking notice. Our mind can be very much on automatic pilot. And what I find is that if you see your mind is very much in the past, it could be that you're experiencing some depression. If you find that your mind is very much in the future and around worry, then it could be you're experiencing some anxiety. But both of those states of mind stop you from being able to be in this present moment. And this present moment is all we have. And this is around taking notice of that, taking notice of your state of mind as well. You know, if I think about how many years I've probably lost, because I've lost today because I was so, you know, busy thinking about the past or the future. Keep learning. I found this a really interesting one. So if in later years or if in life we were to experience where our cognitive reserve is depleting, now if we keep learning, and that's in all the many ways that we can keep learning, whether that's cooking a new recipe, learning another language, could be reading a book, could be a dance class, whatever it is, all the ways that we can keep learning to fill up our cognitive reserve, then it is good for our minds, because if that started to deplete, it will take a longer time for it to go through. And then lastly, we've got giving. You know, this could be your time, it could be your words, your presence, whatever it is. It can be something little, you know, giving somebody a smile or a compliment. But the evidence shows us that actually those that give back, it's our contribution, will report that they are happier. You know, so it's really powerful. And there's lots more information about the 5 ways to wellbeing on the Mind website. I know it is a UK website, but it's called Mind and it's really good. So I want to give you a last top tip here, and it's around the power of listening. I want to show you a little video. It's by somebody called Dr. Brené Brown. You might have heard of her. She's an American clinical research doctor. She's absolutely brilliant to follow on Instagram or on LinkedIn, and a very inspiring woman. And she talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy and the power of listening. So I'll show you the video now.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversation is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Oh, and I hope you like that video as much as I do. I've watched it many times now. That feels really real to me. You know, as a therapist, I don't say to people, you know, at least you've got a marriage. But I do find with friends sometimes that I go to say, well, at least. And I think, oh, you know, that's not an empathic response, because the truth is things can be pretty dire for people and we might not have all of the answers sometimes, but having somebody to, you know, listen to us and to feel really heard and understood, you know, can be so powerful for somebody. And I think it takes the pressure off. You know, sometimes we worry we're going to say the wrong thing, so we think we won't say anything at all. But actually, it's not about always finding the answers. You know, it might be actually where can we push people up to get the professional support that they need or to access. But the power of listening has definitely helped me many times. So I want to thank you all for listening to that. I thought that was quite timely, actually, after we've just looked at the power of listening. So thank you very much. I'll show you the last slide. If you would like to follow me on here on social media for some more tips, or on LinkedIn, whatever it is, please feel free to follow me on there. I'm putting lots of mental health and wellbeing tips. And I'll pass you back over to Sean then for some questions, I believe.
Thank you, Michelle. That was brilliant. I'm definitely going to take away that visual of the bear climbing down the ladder. And I think it's just really about, like you say, you might not have the right words, but it's just knowing that somebody's there and they're next to you. So I really like that. So thank you.
Actually, and I forgot to say, there was a time for me where I'd really built myself up to tell somebody something. And what they did was, it came from a really good place, but they said, I know how you feel because I've gone through this, this and this. And they started telling me what had happened for them. And actually what happened was it shut me down, because I ended up listening to their story, which was a little bit similar to mine.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it just shows, just to be able to just sit there, just to listen is helpful.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for some questions to come in, but I think one of the things I want to ask you, and I use the sort of comparison to Joe Wicks, the body coach, and, you know, he's all about eating well and exercising and moving, but his one takeaway, pardon the pun, is about sleep, you know, getting the right amount of sleep, because it affects everything. It affects your decisions, it affects how you feel. So if you had to pick that one, you know, takeaway for everybody that's joined us tonight, and obviously be watching it back, what would be your sort of one thing to help improve people's mental health and well-being?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you very much. I would agree with Joe, actually, around sleeping. I think sleeping is so important. I mean, the size of my stress container, if I've had 4 hours sleep, the size of my container is the size of an egg cup, actually, the next day. So sleeping, I definitely use guided meditations to help me to get back to sleep. I put my earphones in, but I think it's finding what's right for you, because I find actually talking has been a really helpful space for me. Yeah. Whether that's in therapy or with us, you know, support services, whatever it is. Actually, making sure that you're hydrated as well. Water, you know, that can be just very simple things that can really help instantly. Yeah, but finding what works for you.
And I'm glad that you mentioned, obviously, in your presentation around, you know, the support groups that we've got available through Overcoming MS. And in fact, somebody's asked about, do we have those groups within the UK? And of course, we've got those globally, so our circles. So by all means, people do go on our website, and, you know, where you can talk to other people in a very safe environment, or just listen. Actually, coming back to what we were saying, you know, you can observe and speak when you want to. But we've had a question come in, Michelle. Can you manage your mental health without medication?
Another good question. Excuse me. I think it depends. I'm so sorry. Let me just cough a minute. It won't be a minute. heard lots of things about with medication. So I've seen some people where it can just take the edge off things, and then you're able to, you know, get underneath what's going on. I don't know why I'm coughing all of a sudden. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry.
Sorry, I think I inhaled too much air. Yeah, so like I was saying, it depends. I've seen for some people it can work. It can take the edge off things. It can be very trial and error. But I think, you know, other people will go the other way, where they decide that perhaps they don't want to. And they'll put a collection of things in, you know, well-being and support, whether that's talking therapy, to try to go that way. And I think they're trying to get the GPs now to really look at having talking therapy before they start just prescribing. But I know the lists are quite big, aren't they, at the moment?
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, somebody's actually come up with a really good suggestion about, they said writing lists help them to put their stress down and manage all their thoughts. So that's a really great suggestion from somebody. I've also got a question here about somebody that's lost a bit of hope, basically, because they have secondary progressive MS and they don't want to use medication, but they're very stressed, which upsets their symptoms of living with MS. How would they manage that experience?
Yeah, again, it's very difficult, isn't it? And I wonder that having the right support in place, you know, to perhaps sit down and have a look at all of those stresses. So accessing, whether it would be that support group or whether you offer support sessions, having a look at what's in the stress container to see what you can get help with. You know, and I know sometimes there's things that perhaps, you know, we can't change, but it's how we might be able to get the right help with that.
I had a lovely comment actually saying a great session tonight, thank you. And another good suggestion about adult colouring books can help give you that calming moment. I mean, I've certainly invested in that previously. We don't think of things like that, do we? But that's a really great way of removing yourself and, you know, doing something that's so positive but really simple.
Well, this is where I think it's the power of hobbies and distracting the mind. So I found a local art class. I'm currently based in the Midlands, and so I went to a local art centre and I had to go at sculpturing. So with the clay, and when my mind wasn't feeling very well, I could literally feel the distraction and the creativity that I became immersed in was really healing, which is a bit like where you're talking with the colouring, isn't it? So people really underestimate the power of these creativities and hobbies, of how healing it is.
I think sometimes even just taking ourselves back to our childlike, you know, age, because, you know, we are so innocent, aren't we, when we're younger, and the world is just a less scary place, I guess.
It's that childlike sense of wonder, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to sort of ad-lib this one. Just it's around sort of suicidal thoughts and, you know, the links obviously to mental health. Any, you know, tips, recommendations, people to talk to?
So if somebody was experiencing suicidal thoughts,
yeah,
yeah, I think it's always helpful to go and check in with your GP, because what can happen, we know that can be, you know, a crisis point that can pass, but we need to make sure people are getting the right help and support with that. There's some brilliant helplines as well, but I think, you know, if you feel that you're having those thoughts, it's always good to check in with your GP, just to really unpack that and to get the right help and support. But we've got the Samaritans helpline. Remember that they can't call for an ambulance. They are a listening service. So they're good for out of hours. And I think there's a new one called Shout as well. And Shout is a texting service, which is free, that people can text on. And I can just get the number for that, actually. I was really impressed with it. So if you bear with me,
Thank you, Michelle.
but 20% of the population will experience suicidal thoughts. It's very common. It can feel a way out. And what I would always ask people is, is it that you don't want to feel this way anymore, or is it that you don't want to be alive? Making sure that we get the right support and help with that. Now, is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you. And I just think encouraging people to reach out, not necessarily waiting for tomorrow, but accessing some of those helplines that you suggested, or reaching out to a family member or a friend, somebody that you feel that you can talk to in confidence, and that you could ring at any time, and you should ring at any time.
And then I've just found this. Don't know if you can see it. It's the shout 85. Oh, that's typical low battery. 85258. 85258. And it's a free service that you can text at any time.
24/7, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Sorry, I'm just going to read what we've got. Another really positive comment saying very helpful webinar. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Somebody's put, not sure if it's the best place to mention, but what about CBD or even psychedelics, which seem to be studied more and more for depression?
Yeah, I think we're seeing with CBD, aren't we, actually, that there's lots of healing properties there. And there's lots of studies, like you've mentioned with psychedelics. What I would say is, yeah, I think there's lots more research that needs to go into things, because I'll give you an example. I worked with a student at a university who had taken MDMA. And in fact, I've worked with somebody else that had took a psychedelic. So I'll give you two examples. But the thing is with drugs, what we're doing is we're playing Russian roulette with our neurological system, because we don't know how it will impact for us. So for this young chap who'd taken MDMA, which is ecstasy in its purest form, what happened, he took it and then he ended up hallucinating for a whole week. So he didn't know what was real and what was not. So sometimes we don't know the potency of things or how it will impact for us. So I think it's just being being careful with that, isn't it?
Yeah. I think what I love about our OMS community, our Overcoming MS community, is just the level of support. So in going back to one of the questions around suicidal thoughts, somebody said, given some suggestions of, regarding suicide, don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary situation, as feelings can change. So thank you very much for that, whoever's posted that.
It's perfect.
That is what I love about our community. So supportive. Another question for you, Michelle. Can you tell us more about how stress can result in our DNA unraveling and how this might affect other cells?
So what I know is that the reason why it's been linked to being carcinogenic is because it undoes the bottom of the DNA, it corrodes it. And that's where it becomes the rogue DNAs. I don't know about the other cells, but I can imagine, it really takes its toll on things. But as I'm not a medic, I wouldn't know, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And again, another suggestion of a website for young suicide prevention. That's just lovely. Thank you who's posted that as well. And that's obviously on the Q&A, so everybody can see that. It's www.papyrus, so PAPYRUS UK.org. Thank you for that. Yeah, so in the absence of any other questions, it's last chance saloon for people if you want to get your question into Michelle. Otherwise, we'll wind the session up. But we've had some really positive comments thanking you for running the session.
Oh, well,
give it a few seconds, see if any more come through. Yeah, no, just lots of thank you. So yeah, from me especially, Michelle, thanks for a great session tonight. We will obviously make your PowerPoint available to people that have registered, whether they've attended or not, and we'll also get the link out to the recording of the webinar. But thank you so much for a really interesting session and some great advice there.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Lovely. If you'd just like to stay with me, I'll just do the closing, Michelle. So yeah, obviously a big thanks to Michelle tonight for her presentation. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as I have. The comments certainly say that you have. Just a reminder that you will get that link probably about 5 days after tonight, with that link to the recording, and of course all our other past webinars. We talked about meditation, in fact, earlier. There's lots of webinars and content there that you can go back and watch at your own leisure. We will be back next month as part of the Finding Hope with OMS webinar season. We've got our very popular Ask Aaron webinar on the 13th of November. It is all there on our website for our events coming up, so you can register now. Registration is open, but please do visit our events page, and I hope to see you at the next session. And once again, thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you to everybody that's attended and contributed tonight. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.